Okay, class, hello again. I am here to help you this time with factoring and multiplying binomials. So the first thing I want to look at is this factoring workspace. Now, I've already given you, or hopefully the sub has given you, a set of notes that explains how to use the factoring workspace to factor. But I'm going to work through a couple examples for you. And the first one I want to work through is just multiplying. If I ask you to multiply, how would we use these rectangles to do that? Remember that these rectangles are just a way to organize your work. They're not the only way to do this. They help you organize though. So suppose I had 3x plus 2 times 4x minus 7. Being in parentheses like that means it's asking us to multiply. And so we're going to use this rectangle right here to help us multiply. So give me just a second. I might even zoom in a little so we can see that real well. We're not going to need the diamond for this one because we're just multiplying. But we're going to write on top of the box the 3x plus 2 and going down the side of the box 4x minus 7. And then think of it like a rectangle where you're finding the area. You have your length times your width to get the area of what goes in this box. So 3x times 4x gives us this box, which is 12 from the 3 times the 4. And x times x gives us x squared. Then to get this box, our length is still 3x. Our width is negative 7. So when we multiply those together, we get negative 21x. For this box, our width is 4x and our length is plus 2. So 2 times 4 gives us 8, and we keep the x for 8x. Finally, this last box, our length is 2, our width is negative 7, and 2 times negative 7 gives me negative 14. So when I go to write out my final answer, I'm going to start with my biggest exponent, 12x squared. And then I'm going to move on. And notice that I have negative 21x and a positive 8x. These are like terms, so I'm going to combine them because they're like terms. That will give me negative 21 plus 8, negative 13x. And then this last box here doesn't have any like terms, so it's my last term. There's my final answer when I go to multiply. So you have 4 problems like that on your worksheet. Feel free to go back, watch this again, or slow it down if you need to. But we're going to move on and we're going to do a problem where we're asked to factor. So the first problem that I want you to factor is 4n squared plus n minus 3. Doesn't matter if it's x, n, z, anything like that. They all work the same way. Let me slide it up. All right, so I've written the problem right here. And then we're going to use both the rectangle and the diamond to help us factor this one. So the first thing in the notes it asks us to do is go ahead and fill in everything we know. Well, what we do know is that we have 4n squared, and we're going to put it in that box. The minus 3 was our last term in the last one, or the constant term goes last, so we put that in the last box. And then the other thing we know, remember that this is your product on top, and this is your sum on bottom, what you get when you add them together. Well, remember from the last problem, if I can, just slide it up for a second, we added these 2 diagonals together to get the negative 13. So that middle term there, that is our sum. So in this case, my middle term is 1n. I'm going to go ahead and put the number 1 with it just to help you remember we have 1n there. All right, now to get the product, what we do is we take these 2 right here, this diagonal, and we multiply them together. That gives us the product that we need. 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. And we have an n squared there. All right, so we need to multiply 2 numbers to get negative 12n squared. and add or subtract them, because some can be a positive and a negative number, to get 1. And I'm actually going to mention to you that since this is negative, to get a negative product, you have to have a positive times a negative. So we know that one of our numbers will be plus and one will be minus. So let's look at 12 and let's think of its factors. Well, I could multiply 1 times 12, but there's no way I could subtract those to get 1. I could multiply 2 times 6. Again, they don't subtract to 1. Or I could multiply 3 times 4. Now, I could imagine those subtracting to 1. I do need a positive 1, so I choose to make it 4 minus 3, because 4 minus 3 will give me a positive 1. If I needed a negative 1, I'd go the other way. Now I also need to go ahead and put my letter n in there, because 4n minus 3n will give me 1n. And when I multiply those two n's, I'll get the n squared that I need here. Once I get these two numbers, I'm going to bring them back and put them in this box. It doesn't really matter which box I put in which, but I'm going to go ahead and put this minus 3n here and the 4n here. Again, it doesn't matter which box you put it in, but put it in the same one I did just so you can follow what I'm doing. All right, the next thing I like to do is I like to go ahead and cover up this column and just look at these two numbers, the 4n squared and the 4n. We look for a common factor. Do they have a common factor? Why, yes, they do. The common factor is 4. 4 will divide evenly into both, so I'm going to put a 4 here. I also notice that this one has an n squared and this one has an n. So n is also a common factor. Next, I'm going to think, what about over here then? If this is my length, what do I need for my width so that when I multiply them together, I get 4n squared in that box? Well, 4n times n, or 1n, gives me 4n squared. Next, I'm going to look at this one. If 4n is my length, what width do I need so that I get 4n in the box? Well, just 1, because 4 times 1 will give me 4. So I'm going to put plus 1 here. Next, I'm going to look right here. Well, I've already got the width of my box is n. So what times n will give me negative 3n? Well, negative 3. So my final answer is each of these pieces written as a product. So in other words, going across the top, I have 4n minus 3, and I'm going to put that in parentheses to loop those together. And then going down the side, new parentheses, n plus 1. All right, that is one example. And I just did sort of a random example for that one. But for the next one, I want to look at one that maybe is coming from your worksheet. So I'm even going to help you get a start on your worksheet here today.